Wales at their best are a bad matchup for this Ireland side, and Ireland at their best are a bad matchup for this Welsh side. Both coaches are in a difficult enough place. Andy Farrell, more comfortable than Wayne Pivac, I would say. Pivac had a bad year last year. They only beat Georgia and Italy, lost every other game. So you look at or didn't win in any of the rest of them anyway. So they need a win. They're back in the Millennium Stadium. It's a bit difficult to get up for a game in an empty Parky Scarlets. I mean, Scarlets have had to do that often enough during the Pro 14 to little success. So you'd look at like Wales against Scotland there last year was particularly dour. The Principality Stadium is a different kettle of fish. Even when it's empty, I think it'll have an impact. I'm quite wary about this Welsh side. I think they've got some very, very good players like Justin Tipperick, Talupe Falatau. They look like they're getting those guys into the roles that they want from them. And with a guy like Dan Lydiate back, yes, he might be 33 or 34 years of age, but they will have a very specific role set laid out for him. And if it comes down to being a guy who can chop tackle and stop guys in contact, Dan Lydiate can still do that. He's still been doing that for the Ospreys for the last number of years. This is a game where I heard a lot this week about how Ireland were, well, a lot of the Irish media were super, super confident about this. I am not sharing that confidence right now. I mean, look, the last scoreline that Ireland had against Wales was fairly hefty, 32 points to 9. It was, what, a 25, whatever it was, a 21 or whatever, 20 point plus win anyway. Maths is not my strong point, obviously, or I wouldn't be doing this gig. You look at what Wales did there, they had no scrum. They basically went to a point where they were conceding penalties every other scrum. In that situation, Ireland just kept kicking deep, kicking points. Wales' line-out fell apart. Personally, I don't see that happening again this time around. I don't see Ireland having massive scrum dominance against this Welsh side. You know, Wyn Jones is starting, for one. He's a fantastic scrummager. Now, you never know how a referee might interpret something, how they might interpret the scrum in general. I'm not expecting massive dominance from one side or the other here, but it's one that I just have a uneasy feeling that Wales are chronically underrated at the moment, that they were bad last year, results were bad, but if you look through the games they lost, there was a small enough margins on a strike move working out, but a pass that just goes forward or just gets knocked on. I think that there's a lot better to come from this Welsh side. And if they click the way Wayne Pivac teams before have clicked, like we all remember Scarlets from the Pro 12, they were unplayable. If that translates upwards to Test rugby with Wales, Ireland could be in for a very, very rough time this Sunday.
Just bringing up the graphic of the Welsh team on the screens there, Tom. Where do you think Ireland could possibly make inroads in this Welsh side? And on the flip side, where do you think Wales are fairly strong?
You look at his role as a sort of a kind of a wing forward who's also one of the best line-out operators in the game. He's got fantastic skills out there. He can pass, he can offload, he can kick the ball. Van der Fleer as well as a guy who I'd love to see him getting a bit more ball in space. I think we saw a bit last year too with CJ Stander showing up in those wider areas for Munster and for Ireland. Look, I think that there's a lot of potential for Ireland to kind of really take their attacking play up a notch from where it was. But again, and I think it actually stacks up quite well with the selection that Wales have. But they will need to show a level of variety with regards to the handlers that we haven't really seen for a while. From a Welsh point of view, they'll be looking to try and get their back row, the likes of Justin Tipperick and Talupa Falatau, into attacking positions. These are two incredibly talented football players. They're guys who can carry the ball. They can truck it up for you, yes, but they're most at home, I feel, backing their skill set in a bit of space. When they align themselves off 10, they are incredibly dangerous. Because again, you look at Wayne Pivac's style at the Scarlets, it's about getting width. It's about actually overloading certain areas of the field at times with guys who can handle the ball. His back row at the time, it had Barkley there, who was a very, very talented all-round player. And Tyke Byrne obviously was a guy who he's got a very expanded skill set as well. So the same will apply for the the kind of the test version really. So can they get there? Can they get those guys into action? I think if you look at from the Irish perspective, like with Wales looking at Ireland, they'll be thinking that if they do a good bit better in the scrum and can at least protect their own line out, that they can maybe have a crack off disrupting Ireland's line out possession. I know Paul O'Connell's only just after coming in, but they may be looking at and going, new coach coming in, he's probably going to want to simplify things to start off. Maybe we can get the likes of Adam Beard, Justin Tipperick, who's a fantastic counter jumper as well. Maybe we can get him up into their throwing lanes and disrupt some ball. And if Wales can do a good job of taking away our line-out launch off us, then it could be a very, very long night, or long afternoon rather. But we'll have to wait and see. I think both sides are quite well balanced, and in the same areas where Wales need to see what they look like now going forward, I think Ireland are in much the same boat.
Tom, I suppose, look, one argument that could be made is if you just take the domestic scene and provincial rugby in Ireland, club rugby in Wales, or regional rugby in Wales, if you were to look at the results over the Pro 14 season, then this game should be a no-brainer. How is it that when it comes to the national side, when we meet Wales, the gap seems to close?
Test rugby is far and away higher level than Pro 14. Higher than European Cup level, even. It's just different. I would wonder, like, a lot of people are talking about the Italians and about the Italians not producing a challenge. I've often thought about going to some of those Welsh teams during the earlier parts of the season, where they're just not providing a challenge in the Pro 14. But that's at the Pro 14, and that will change if they get their test players back regularly, because I think a full strength Scarlet side would be a tough game for anybody really. Cardiff are improving all the time. The Ospreys too, I think once they get their stuff together, I think that there's a lot of good players there. At test level, like, you just look at the individuals, these are very good players. Like, you look at Ken Owens, a quality player. Alan Wynne-Jones is still an absolute legend of the game and still hugely important to Wales. He's not slowing down. If anything, he's actually more important to Wales now than what he would have been a few years ago. You look at a guy like Adam Beard, great size, great wingspan, has the potential to be a serious test player. He's still relatively young. You look at Talupa Falatau, multiple cap Lion, Justin Tipperick as well. Another, when people talk about who's going to start for the Lions, a lot of guys be looking at Justin Timberlake as your kind of classic open side. So
Justin Timberlake.
Did I say Justin Timberlake or Justin Tipperick?
You say Justin Timberlake. just to be clear, Justin Timberlake is not starting for Wales.
Oh my God! It's just I'm still so obsessed. I'm so obsessed with Justin.
I think we've even coordinated coloured hoodies for this evening as well.
Was that not the plan?
We look like some sort of cult. So we put. What were the cult in The Simpsons called, Tom? Jesus. Can't remember. Remember Homer had the
Stone
birthmark.
cutters.
Yes, the stone cutters.
Stone cutters.
Yes. We'll do the secret handshake and off air.
But yeah, no, yeah, like you look at the individuals that Wales have, and it's just quality all the way through. Like, you know, and especially like they've got a few injuries, a few guys as well who they haven't properly replaced. Hadley Parks yet, he was a quality player for them too. I think they're very undervalued, and yeah, you could look at their results last year and go rubbish, but I think that does a disservice to the actual inherent quality to these guys at test level. There's quality players there, and that isn't always the case at regional level, but at test level, Wales are formidable, and I think they're much better than what their results recently have said. Even if they do have Justin Timberlake playing for them at open side.
Yeah, that's probably an area that Ireland will target. Tom,
get Gavin James in there or something.
where is it going to go right for Ireland if it does go right? Where are we going to get where are we going to get that momentum that we need to beat Wales? I mean, you know, we see the criticism of Ireland from the autumn series. We saw the performance against France and England, which, you know, came up fairly short for a finish. Like if you're Andy Farrell, what are you looking for from this Irish side? And if you're, I suppose, the Irish rugby public, what, you know, we just want the team to be competitive again. We're not expecting them to win every single match, but we do want to see or hope to see some sort of development or evolution or improvement.
Yeah, the reason I think this game is such a banana skin for Ireland is last year we beat Wales twice, relatively comfortably, and still the Irish group was judged quite harshly on how they went against England and France. That is still the case. But playing Wales in Wales is going to be different. Like all our games against Wales last year were in Dublin. Like playing them in Wales is different. I don't care if it's an empty stadium. They are going to be a formidable outfit there. And for me, it's important that Ireland win collisions. That's one of my biggest things, that like it doesn't always have to be playing off nine. But you do need to play off nine sometimes to set position and to give yourself time to get your attacking structures into shape. If we start losing those collisions off nine early, and you would look at their selection of Dan Lydiate is probably directly related to trying to prevent Ireland from getting any sort of dominant position off nine. That is something I think that needs. If Ireland aren't winning those collisions, then that will be a sign that things are not possibly going the way that we want them to. Because if you think about it, if Ireland are very direct through Sexton, as in most of our release plays that don't go to the forwards off nine, tends to go through Sexton, that in itself is predictable. So if Wales can take away a lot of our work off nine, not just deny gain line, but create slow ball, you can just picture a Dan Lydiate chop tackle with somebody like Justin Tipperick or Talupa Falatau or any one of those guys getting in over the ball and winning a turnover, or at least slowing the ball down. If you can slow Ireland down, we are much more likely to kick. In that moment, then you can start to generate transitions, which Wales are very dangerous on. And that's before they start getting into their kicking game, not just off nine, but their high balls off bigger. They are going to be testing out Keith Earls, Hugo Keenan, and James Lowe. They're going to have a right cut off these lads too. That's an area of the game where I think we don't have a solid answer there yet as to, you know, because I think Hugo Keenan has been playing very well. But let's not forget that he had a few errors against Munster under the high ball as well. But that kind of gets forgotten when Leinster won that game. So it kind of comes down to those small little margins, which is an annoying thing to say because it always comes down to that really. But it'll be whoever can take their chances and whoever can avoid coughing up the most amount of mistakes. Because I think territory will be hugely important in this game because I can see both sides cancelling each other out ball in hand.
Yeah, I suppose the other thing we have to consider as well is that, you know, I'm looking forward to seeing Tadhg Beirne in the second row. He's one guy that, you know, we've seen the performances from Munster, we've seen the turnovers, we've seen how good he is at the breakdown. I know you said there about chop tackle and Tipperick coming in to seal off or to win possession, but on the flip side, we have a few tricks up our sleeve in that sense too, with the likes of O'Mahony and Tadhg Beirne in there. So there's a lot of there's quite a lot of similarities between the two sides as well in how they go about their how they go about their business. It's just a case of who I think who settles first and who can establish that first. It's all, you know, you also know about the painting the right pictures for the referee at the breakdown, and who gets to paint that picture first can be really, really important as well. So there's all these little kind of really, really fine details, like you just said, that are going to have a massive bearing on this game.
Yeah, we have a lot of talented jackals in our selection. Like, you know, you look at Tyke Byrne, he's known for it, but like he's a very well-rounded player now. You know, I think that since his ankle injury back at, I think, was it 2020? Was that the year? I'm not sure. You look at that and go, since he came back from that, he's added on that extra few kg, I think, and he looks all the better for it. You look at him against France last year, he was winning those collisions. He was showing up. He was like getting over the gain line. His line-out work is very athletic. He's like a guy who's got great skills. He was like one of Munster's top passers last week against Leinster. So I think that there's definitely an opportunity for Tyke Byrne to stake a real claim here. I think he's definitely in there. If you look at it doesn't always come down to form. It comes down to who's most suitable for the role you need for them at this level. And I think Tyke Byrne has shown that he's playing at a very, very high level now. Ian Henderson is unfit. Well, he's not unfit. He obviously is fit if he's there, but he hasn't been playing recently. So you look at he'll come off the bench with a bit to prove, more than likely to replace Tyke Byrne unless there's an injury elsewhere. So that's something I think is going to be an interesting one to see how those guys get on. But I think that I think there's a fair bit of noise about whether Rhys Ruddock was going to make this team. He's certainly been playing well in the Pro 14, but again, my question about that is that I would wonder about the level of those Pro 14 games. Like, you look at them and go, like, Rhys Ruddock is a guy who's been playing Test rugby for the guts of 10 years. I think that the guys they've selected, I could make a very coherent argument for having Rhys Ruddock on the bench, but they've gone with Will Connors. We know we get from him a really, really good defence, big work rate there as well. Another guy who's a very effective chop tackler. Good guy for supporting the ball at the breakdown, offensive breakdown. Good skill set as well. So again, they have guys there starting and finishing who can win this game. And the bench is going to be hugely important. People want about finishers, but the guys who Ireland have here, if they come off the bench and play like they can, then Ireland could have too much for Wales coming into the last 20 minutes.
Yeah, let's hope that it pans out that way. Tom, I'm going to get you to call the result on Sunday with a 3 o'clock kickoff. Who do you think is going to be victorious at around 4:45?
I think it's going to be incredibly tight. I'm going with a narrow 5-point win for Ireland. I think that if the Tadhg Furlong from 2018 and the Dave Kilcoyne from late 2019 and the Ian Henderson from 2018 come off the bench, I think Ireland will have too much for Wales as this game develops. It'll come down to clever management of the field. We will have to show better work on counter-attack. We'll have to try and get some line breaks on our phase play. But I think that Ireland, if they take their opportunities, I'm going to go with a 5-point win for Ireland. Yeah,
and a good point there about the Irish bench. The Irish bench, there is a lot of impact on that bench. But of course, guys coming on off the bench, it all depends on what they're coming into too. You know, if they're coming into a situation where Ireland are looking to, close out a game, then those impacts are great. If they're coming into a situation where Ireland are chasing 10 points, that's an entirely different impact that you're trying to have, and it's a different ask entirely.
Yeah.
There are, of course, 2 other games that will take place the day before on the Saturday. Italy at home to France, and England versus Scotland. Italy-France kicking off at 2:15 and England-Scotland at 4:45. Tom, a very young Italian side against a French side that I suppose will be probably second favourites for this competition outside of England, if I had to guess. Probably definitely the best of the rest, and the side looking most likely to be not only challenging England this year, but for the next maybe 4 or 5 years. A French side on the up. We saw them play excellent rugby in fits and starts last year. Their best, I would put it, their best season in a while, their most consistent season in a while. I cannot see them dropping points to Italy in the opening game of the championship.
No, Italy have nothing to lose, really. They're really looking to build towards the future. They've got a lot of quality players there. None better, I think, than Paolo Garbisi, Venetian guy playing with Benetton. He's a quality young player, real talent. They're going to look at trying to build a style of play that kind of in some way dovetails with what Franco Smith likes to do. He is the former Cheetahs boss in the Pro 14. They like to throw the ball around. They like to play with tempo, with width, with pace. Italy will have to do that if they want to compete in the Six Nations. And there's a possibility that they can catch France napping. France last year they seemed better defensively, but they seemed to concede a fair bit more tries than what you would have expected, given the reputation that they were having with Sean Edwards. They looked good when they were defending deep. I think that Italy, if they can start slinging the ball around effectively, I think they have the possibility to actually take an early lead against France at the very least. Whether they hang on to it or not, I don't know. I think France ultimately will have too much power for them. But I think that Italy will go down swinging. Hopefully, anyway. I'm a big fan of Italy.
Tom, the other Saturday game is two old rivals. Scotland making the trip down to Twickenham to take on England, where they haven't won in quite some time. But again, look, probably the best part about this rivalry at the moment is the bitterness between the two head coaches and the very palpable dislike between Gregor Townsend and Eddie Jones. And you know, two guys that I know you wouldn't have much love lost for either of them. On the field, hard to see Scotland. You know, Scotland have always talked a good game, but
they always do.
Talking a good game and going down to Twickenham and pulling it out of the bag when you really need it are two different things. I can't see Scotland having anything really to threaten England in this game.
You wouldn't think so, but I think it was 2 years ago they gave England a right scare down there.
Was that the drawn game?
That was the drawn game in Twickenham. I think England are probably the most well-rounded team in the tournament this year. You look at the guys they have available. Mario Itoje, who for me is the best forward playing the game at the moment. I think he's just unbelievably good. Scotland have some interesting players that they're building in. They're looking towards the future as well. I'm interested to see how Cameron Redpath goes. They've got Duhan van der Merwe playing as well, who I think is just a fabulous player for them on the wing. Finn Russell always can make stuff happen. Scotland are going to be up against it. I would expect England to win by 15 points plus, but there's just something about Scotland when Finn Russell is playing that they just have this potential to make stuff happen sometimes. Sometimes that stuff is bad. Sometimes it's good. I think that they have they could possibly give England a bit of a fright. I just think England are too good. They've got a lot of injuries, but you look at the size, the power, the quality that England have all through their side. You know, you look at their setup coming off the bench with the likes of George Ford coming on in the second half, like he did last time around against Scotland in Twickenham. I think England have a lot of options, even with the injuries they have. Like you've got Mark Wilson, Tom Curry, and Billy Vunipola in their back row. There's just a lot of quality and size, power there. I think that England will win that game relatively comfortably, and they'll be a big shout to be the Grand Slam winners, I think, this year. I think they've certainly got it in them.
Certainly do. Yeah, Tom, I think that has covered off the Six Nations, and if I'm correct, you're going France, England, Ireland. France to be comfortable over Italy, England to do enough for Scotland, and a very tight one on Sunday.
A very, very tight one for Ireland. That could go either way, but I'm just hoping it goes Ireland's way.
Speaking of the content that you're going to have on the page and that you have been doing, I know it's gone from the red eye to the green eye over the next few weeks, and it will stay that way until the end of the competition. But what has been happening on Three Eye Kings?
I've been looking at Ireland's use of looped runners in the back three and how it pertains to their work off nine and why it's so important for Ireland to win collisions there. That's in the green eye this week, which you can get at patreon.com/Three Eye Kings for just €2 a month.
And funnily enough, this week, no media reports of how Johnny Sexton is too old, too slow, and is the detriment of the Irish backline in the build-up to this big game.
Not yet. They will have to wait to see how Saturday goes.
We still have time. Thank you very much, Tom. We'll talk